Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women in Cairo series here on Cairo Family Living Platform. I'm Isla Farotto, mum of three, community builder, and your host for today. This series celebrates women who are shaping life in Cairo through resilience, creativity, and community. Today's guest brings a unique perspective on life, travel, and accessibility. I'm delighted to welcome Keticia, an Australian mum of 12-year-old twins, married to an Egyptian. In July 2025, she and her family relocated from Australia to Cairo to spend more time with extended family and explore travel opportunities. Through her blog and platform, Our Accessible Travels, she shares real stories, tips, inspiration for making travel inclusive and accessible for everyone. Today, we'll explore her journey from adjusting to life in Cairo with children to navigating complex needs to building a blog that inspires families worldwide. Thank you, Keticia, for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. It was great to get an opportunity to talk more about this expat life.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you and your family here to Cairo.
So in 2024, we had an opportunity to come visit my father-in-law for about a month. And it was just amazing that the longer the travel period went on, the more cognitive flexibility we saw from my daughter, who has a number of disabilities, both physical and neurodevelopmental. And my son was connecting with another side of his culture, and his confidence was growing. It was wonderful spending time with family. And I've always loved Egyptian people. I've loved previous visits to Egypt. So when we returned to Australia, I was looking for ways to replicate this sort of magic bubble that we had in development. And while I tried a few different things, ultimately we thought, well, the kids are at a stage where it's really appropriate for them to be able to come and travel with us. They'll still like us at the moment. Give it a few more years when they're teens, and that might not be the case to enjoy so much time with family. And so we were like, let's just take the plunge. Both my husband and I have lived in other countries. We actually met in China when we both lived there. We've also lived in Dubai and in America. And so we thought, well, this will be a great opportunity to help the kids connect with family, to have an opportunity to travel, into Europe. It's so far from Australia. I love Australia so much, but it's just so challenging to travel more frequently when the distance is so great. So that's what sort of encouraged us to make this move. That's okay. I also talked about how it really helped both Laith and Soraya, my kids, in different ways. Laith with his confidence, Soraya with her overall development and connection, and her stress levels came down, which, in some ways seems ironic when you think about Cairo and how hectic it can be. But taking her out of a traditional school environment, which can be really stressful for her. And that's nothing to slight the mainstream environment she was in Australia. They bent over backwards. They were incredible at recognizing where she was at, meeting her there and looking for options for her to develop. But just that environment in general was taking so much of her energy just to cope with the day to day that I think it, fatigued her in regards to developing other aspects of her life.
Thank you for sharing that. You spoke a little bit about the transition from Australia to Egypt. How have you found that transition so far?
Look, I think we've been very, very lucky and very blessed in that my husband is originally from Egypt. He hasn't lived here since he was 12 years of age, but we do have my father-in-law here. We have aunts, uncles, cousins. So I feel like we kind of had this really soft landing. Also, that we had been here fairly recently on an extended holiday really helped. So we already had a little bit of an idea of layout, things that we had enjoyed, things that we were looking forward to. We were very fortunate and able to stay in a property that Kareem's family owns. So it all felt very easy. And I know that's not the case for everyone, and it's not been the case each time I've been an expat. And I think that when you have children is really critical, having somewhere that's, as close to set up as it can be, that you can step into and then do little touches that makes it feel like your own home. I think the sooner that you have your home settled, the sooner that your soul settles.
That's nice. I'm really happy that you settled in well and that things are flowing really
Yeah.
well for you.
It's definitely been a positive experience for
I
us.
love that. So let's just spend a bit about the family and the children. Share a little bit about the twins. What activity do they enjoy here in Cairo? What do they like to do? Extracurricular
Yeah.
activities that they're involved in.
So we are a member of the Heliopolis Sporting Club, which is, very different compared to what life is like in Australia. But I totally understand living here now why it's helpful to be part of a sporting or social club, particularly when you have kids. So Laith trains with a water polo team and he trains 3 to 4 times a week, which he loves. He came back from water polo last night, smiling and telling me all about, what training involved. He also takes private tennis lessons there. Tennis is a sport that he'd wanted to play, but we just, couldn't fit it in with our schedule in Australia. So we're starting off privately so that he can get a feel for what it's like and then hopefully join in with some other kids. It's great for the social aspect too, because the kids are doing distance education at home. They're not in a regular school environment. And for my daughter, like I've been amazed and so pleased to see the support that's available through our club for people with disabilities. So she actually has joined a swimming program there, and swimming was one of those things that just was a game changer for us. We had been doing swim lessons for a number of years in Australia, and it's like she's found herself in the water. So being able to see her with coaches that are understanding, that recognize the needs that she has, and working with her to help her grow and develop as a swimmer has been incredible. And through our club, we've also been able to access horse riding lessons that are specifically targeted for people with disabilities. So she has her horse riding lessons actually at a nearby club, but was connected through the program at our sporting club.
And is that something you could have done in Australia, or is it something that you're just doing it?
Look, it's something that I had wanted to do. It was challenging because in the area that I was in, it would have meant like quite a long drive, maybe 45 minutes to an hour to get to a program that did that. And the ability to self-fund something like that in Australia is really meaning that you have to completely cut back on other things or just out of reach. So it's been great to see us be able to access those services here.
When you told me about water polo and all of that, I was so excited for you.
Yeah,
It just sounds really amazing. Yeah, really exciting.
and I think like what's really cool too about the sporting clubs is like we were there the other day and we brought along some friends just so that the kids could hang out because there's big playground areas where the kids can, which you just can't access really outside of that unless you head to maybe Al Azhar or, Family Park, Central Park, Medinti. And so having a space
I
like
love that
that.
you're dropping gems though. I love that you're dropping all of these.
So I come from a really tiny town in Australia. Well, not really tiny. For us, it's small. There's about 1,200 people in the Shire of the town that I come from. So I'm really used to having those deep roots of connection and people that feel like an extension of your family in some ways because you're looking out for each other. And it's amazing that I feel like in such a big city in Cairo, there is that focus on community and connection. I feel like things here are very relational rather than transactional. Like even when you're just meeting, people that are in the shops that are nearby as you're chatting to them and asking their name, there's this real sense of joy in seeing you again for the next time. And I think that's hard to achieve in such a large city that has so many other things to offer that you get this kind of grounding and sense of connection. Yesterday, Susu took her favorite game downstairs because there are some neighbors' kids that often hang out downstairs. She took that down to play with them, and while they don't have the same language, the language of laughter was enough, like to hear them all giggling. And then they even somehow roped in a couple of like the adult neighbors that were coming by, like, come play this game with us. So I think here in Egypt, people feel really open to making connections and not just a transactional relationship.
It's bringing me so much joy hearing all this because I can definitely relate.
The people in Egypt in general, I think, are very warm, very authentic, very driven to help. You see it all the time. We were out the other day and a poor lady, I think she slipped on a tile and, she went down quite hard. Before my husband could even like react to go, there were already people and, it was like seeing that teamwork and that sense of community come together to help people. You unfortunately don't see that in a lot of larger cities.
Yeah, and Cairo's big in love, big in size as well. So what's it like raising children with complex needs here in Cairo? And how does that compare to experiences in Australia? I think you touched on a bit in terms of pricing and accessibility. Is there anything else?
Look, as far as price and accessibility, Australia is wonderful. They have a national disability insurance scheme. It certainly has its troubles, but having lived in America, for example, for the first 3 years of the kid's life and seeing what, amazing services that are available, but, I won't go into how crazy that system can be. So Australia is very, very lucky in that it supports its residents really well to provide opportunities for people with disabilities within a structure and framework. And for some reason, whether it's that sort of connection with family here that tends to be a little bit deeper for her, or whether it's, not going to school in a mainstream environment, for whatever reason, she seems to be more resilient here. Her independence has grown, which is, as a mum, is incredible. That's what we all want as our children get a bit older, is to develop a little bit more of a sense of themselves. But I have been impressed with things like physiotherapy services here. But I think also the privilege of being able to have support in the home, like having a lady that comes in a couple of days a week, the mental load that's taken off me as far as like taking care of the house, like that in itself lends itself to me being able to connect more authentically with less stress myself with the kids. So that's probably a part of it
Not just
as
that, then you
well.
can do stuff like this as well, right?
Oh yeah.
You have time
Yes.
to
Without
do
without interruptions,
exactly.
inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah, it's important. We spoke about a little bit about long distance education. What
Yeah.
has the experience been like here? And what advice
Um,
would you give to parents that are wanting to come to Cairo but continue with long distance education?
yeah. So I feel like we're very lucky in Australia because you're able to access the state-based school system and live externally and continue with the Australian curriculum. For us, the initial, first week or two was a little bit challenging just in regards to making sure that all of the technology was working, finding a rhythm. But I feel like it's been an excellent choice for us because it helps meet my son's goals. He wants to go back to Australia and do an aeronautic engineering program in high school. So it
Cool. I
allows,
love.
yeah,
I've got a scientist at home as well, so
like that's what you want to see, right? And I think that's been the key for distance ed, whether you do homeschool, whether you do distance ed, whether you do world schooling. I think freeing up the amount of time that they have, because you can imagine when a child's spending 6 hours a day in school, one, that's a big chunk of your day gone, like in a mainstream system. They're quite tired after that. And then when you think about all of the hours that's spent by the teacher in things like classroom control and, just getting that information out there, what ends up happening with distance education is you're getting the same content, but it's a much shorter period per day. So Laith, who's in grade 6, he works through his whole Australian curriculum in about 2.5 to 3 hours per day. And we've set it up that he does that 4 days per week because we're behind Australia. We need to make sure that we hand our work in ahead of the time it would be there so that it's ready for the teachers. And so that's kind of worked really well for us because it gives us more time to connect as a family as well. And his teachers have been really lovely and flexible as far as, scheduling times. There's one of his teachers that schedules a time with him at 6 p.m. at night in Australia so that Lake's not having to wake up at like 5:30 in the morning. I feel like it's been a great experience for us. For Soraya, we've been very fortunate. They have her continuing on an individual curriculum. So she just does maths, English, and science, and she does that at a preparatory level because that's where she's at. And they've been really flexible as far as looking at what supports they can provide from a distance. And I'm essentially what's called a home tutor. So then, the teachers are really open in communicating with me, and I support both the children to make sure that they're on track, help them to access resources that they might need. But yeah, it works really well for our family.
It's really nice. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you're happy with it. And hopefully some parents who are unaware of this can think about doing
Yeah.
the same as
And
well.
there is a homeschool community in Cairo as well. So one of the things that we love to do, I feel like it kind of anchors our week, is on a Wednesday, we head out to meet up with some other really lovely families who are all doing homeschooling. And, some of them are following like a Canadian curriculum, some are following an American curriculum. It's really like quite broad ranging. Some have developed their own curriculums, which is great too. But what's wonderful is seeing the kids get that chance for social connection, multi-age social connection too. So we have literally from a few months old baby all the way through to, I think we have three 12-year-olds in our group, the eldest of the kids. So it's this wide range of kids, wide range of nationalities. And as a parent, getting to have that social time for me, I feel like is just as important, if not more important, than the kids. Because when I'm feeling settled, the whole house is feeling settled.
100%. We spoke about life in Cairo a little bit but in terms of what was your first impression of Cairo and how has it compared to other places you've lived in? So when you
Yeah.
first arrived, I know you've been here a few times, so that question's not as relevant, but do you
Yeah.
remember your first impression?
My first impression I'd have to go back to would be first time arriving here in 2009 for a visit. And I think what kind of helped me was that I had previously lived in China. There were elements that, felt somewhat similar in regards to the crazy, chaotic traffic, you know, and coming back more recently, this time, like the traffic's only gotten worse.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I wasn't sure that that was possible based off the first time, but like I feel like Cairo is like color and chaos, but I love the food, I love the people. I think when you've lived in other cultures as well, like I first moved to China when I was in my mid 20s. I lived in Dubai in my early 30s. I lived in the US mid 30s through to early 40s. And obviously, having lived in Australia as well, I think you develop this kind of cognitive and cultural flexibility. I think that, when you've had enough moments where the cultural norm is so different than your own and you've experienced that enough times, you get to a point where you feel a bit more flexible about it. You take it on board more as, well, this is the culture here and I'm living in that culture. So, as they say in Arabic, aidi, like this is normal.
Heidi. Yeah, you just
Aidi.
adapt, right? And
So,
you know,
yeah, you do adapt so much.
it's funny how I don't know, maybe because I'm a Londoner, I don't find, and I live in New Cairo, I don't
Okay.
find the traffic that mad. The driving is mad, but the traffic is like for me, like the roads are bigger. I have more
Yeah.
space to navigate. So for me, it's like, oh. But I
Yeah, I
don't
guess
leave
it's that.
New
Yes.
Cairo much, to be honest. I don't go to downtown. When I go to downtown, it's like I wouldn't
Oh,
drive there. But in New Cairo, I
come
feel
with me
like
to downtown. Let's do a trip. I was at Khan Khalili the other day, and they have like the best pistachios and cashews and dried fruit, so much cheaper than anything you'll find
I will
anywhere.
do. I will
I'm like,
come. I've
it's
been to
it's worth a
Kalakhalili,
trip for
but
that.
I've just been looking. My mum came on holiday.
Yeah.
I went with a friend. She wanted to find some beads, but I want to
Yeah.
go with you because I feel
Come
like you
with
know where you're
me.
going.
Yeah. I'm
This
getting
is,
there. That's that lucky thing of landing here with family connections. When it was, I'm going to say it wrong, but Eid al-Musab, like
Mhm.
the Prophet's birthday,
Yeah.
and one of Kareem's cousins took us into Bab al-Bahr. And so it's like downtown, it's crazy, chaotic. It's you imagine like Khan al-Khalili, but the wholesale version of that. And so you're
I want to
walking through.
go.
Yeah, I know, right? That's what I love. I love getting to see. There's a lady that I follow on Facebook and Insta, Alexandra Davidova. Hope I've said
Okay.
that right. Alex Explores is what she goes by. And she does this series that she entitles like Masr versus Egypt. And Egypt is like that sort of new Cairo and those experiences that are maybe more familiar for those of us that have lived in the West. And then Masr is like that's the
Okay.
heartbeat of Egypt. It's like
Okay.
it's a little bit more traditional and it's a little bit more gritty and but it's so full of amazing characters and yeah, I that's how I've always loved to travel.
I love that. I always ask this question because I'm a languages girl. I love languages. So, and
Yeah.
you've lived in a few places. So, what languages do you speak, and how has language shaped your experience here? Are you speaking Arabic
نتكلم
yet?
شوية شوية. I speak a
Shit.
little. مش نص ونص. I do speak just the rudimentary and Laith, my son and I, taking lessons and learning Arabic. Definitely enough to get by and try to make connections. And I feel like we're a bit spoilt in this day and age with things like Google Translate. While it's definitely not perfect, it's a far cry from what it was like when I moved to China in 2006. And there were no services like this, and I didn't speak a single word of Mandarin. And after, a year there, I was getting by really easily. I don't read and write Mandarin, but I still speak Mandarin conversationally. Every time I bump into anyone anywhere in the world that I overhear Mandarin, I immediately am like very excited and jump in to have a conversation with them. My son finds it amusing, but it's been so helpful with travels. Sometimes you'll bump into someone and neither of you really have each other's languages, but you might have another language in common. So I speak conversational French and, I'm learning Arabic and getting by, which is the most, I feel like I say to my son all the time, like, you don't have to be perfect. Your grammar doesn't have to make sense. You just need to be understood. If that means throwing a mime in here and there, if that means getting the word wrong and being corrected, then great, because you're going to learn
Learn
more about
more.
that for next time and you'll remember it better for next time.
And I love that you said that whenever you can, you speak
Yeah,
Mandarin. Whenever
yeah,
you can, whenever you
absolutely.
have the opportunity. I feel like that's really important. And it's good that you're doing something that your children can mirror as well. So
Yeah, I think
you're
they're
almost,
seeing me be fearless when it comes to making mistakes and laughing at myself. I am certified as an English as a second language speaker. And for any of the students that I've taught over the years, my biggest thing is if you want to speak a language, you need to be willing to make a fool of yourself. You need to be okay with that and put yourself out there to do it. The more that you're afraid, the less that you're going to speak. But I think my theory is I love to connect with people through language, regardless of what that is. And I think that then gives you the motivation to want to learn a language because you want to connect with people. I love learning idioms. I always think that's quite fun. I love learning local sayings. I think it's hilarious when you're working with people and you bring out a saying that they're really totally is unexpected because it's such an Egyptian saying. So I'll often ask my husband, "Oh, what was that I heard?" And have him tell me about it and explain it to me, and I'll try to look for opportunities to use it so I can practice it. Even if it's just the most basic elements, I think it shows that desire to connect, and I think people really respond to that and people are willing to help you here as well. So I think it's just understanding that you're going to get it wrong sometimes, and that's okay. Like that's part of the learning process. It's a bit like we teach our kids that growth mindset of the way to move forward and learn is through making mistakes.
so what has surprised you most about yourself since moving to Cairo?
Maybe it's that I'm a little bit more flexible with time here. I have always been that person that I like to be on time. I, make sure that the kids know everything that needs to happen in order for us to be on time. And if I'm running late, it does usually make me really quite stressed out internally at least, and sometimes, unfortunately, a little bit more irritable externally. And I found this over time when I lived in Dubai, right? Because it's that same concept of time. And so I feel like I'm less of a stress head when it comes to being perfectly on time. Because on time for me is typically 10 to 15 minutes early. Whereas I feel like the stress behind that has somewhat relaxed.
So what lesson have your children taught you through this transition?
I would say that the lessons that they teach me are often universal, and they're definitely your greatest teacher. And I think I was certainly given specific children to help me learn certain lessons, that's for sure. I think a lot of parents can relate to that. But resilience is such a key thing. And I think travel in general, and certainly any type of intercultural relations, teaches you a lot of resilience because plans change. You need to become a bit more flexible. You need to adapt to your environment more. And so seeing the resilience that the kids have shown. So for Susu, for Soraya, my daughter, food has always been a really big challenge for her. And like to the point where she's still incredibly restricted with her diet, but previously, if it wasn't the same brand of spaghetti, even without seeing the packaging, she would notice it and she would be really upset, and that would be very challenging for her for long periods of time. But seeing her step outside of her comfort zone and accept that the foods are different here, and occasionally being willing to try something new, and learning to adapt and deal with the fact that, the bread tastes different here than it does at home. It seems like a small thing, but that's massive, massive growth. And I feel like that in itself is this like micro moment of what it's like on a larger scale for all of us. We notice the changes, we may resist the changes at time, but over time we learn to adapt, and those sandpaper moments buff down our rough edges around some of those experiences. But throughout that process, we actually become more resilient. We develop the ability to adapt. So I think that's been a big teacher. How about your kids? Have they been quite resilient?
Yeah, more than me. Yeah. Sometimes I start missing their friends.
Of
And then when
course,
they have
that's
an
so
issue, it's like I want
natural.
to go back. But in general, to be honest, they're extremely happy and
Yeah.
they've done way better than me.
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
been your biggest challenge?
Missing my community, I'd say, is the
Yeah.
biggest.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like, again, it's so easy though these days. I mean, the first time that I moved overseas was 20 years ago, and technology in those 20 years has changed so significantly.
Dramatic. Remember,
Um,
like it was Skypey and
Skype,
like
yeah.
that's how I used to get talk to my mom and dad when I was in Erasmus.
And dial up sometimes, even though it was 2006, just with issues that we would have. And, it was a whole different world. I feel like things are far more accessible here. I'm lucky two of my best friends are coming to visit in May, which is incredible. And being able to chat with people and see their face and, be able to celebrate the excitement of different things that are happening, like, friends with kids at home that we can call and find out how their first day of high school went, or hear about their music concert that they've attended, or whatever it is, just like being there, even if it's from a distance, for those key critical moments, I think helps you keep your sense of community, even if it's from afar.
How have you found building friendships and community here in Cairo?
I think I touched on that we're part of a homeschool community. So that's really lovely because it gives you a sense of other people that have that same lived experience. And I think while it's great to find people from a whole host of different backgrounds, what connects us is any type of shared interest or shared experience. It's been great having the club. While I haven't made a strong sense of community within that, there's women that I can chat with at varying levels, depending on who has English skills, that have kids with disabilities. So that connects us. I think, as I said, having family is critical. Like if something's going on or if we've got something coming up, I'll have one of Kareem's aunts give me a call and say, "Oh, I heard about this," or "I saw this." And so having those touch points is really crucial, I think, to helping you feel settled, and then knowing that you've still got your strong roots with your friendships at home keep you grounded.
Going to a place where you have some sort of family there does make it a little bit easier. But
Oh,
then
it's
again,
such a soft.
it's also doable to go to somewhere where you haven't. We just have to
Yeah.
be put ourselves out there more.
And look, not everyone is blessed with, even if you do go somewhere and you have family, I certainly hear from other people that I've met that that's sometimes provided them with more challenges. That's something that happens, right? Like you go thinking it's going to be X, Y, and Z of an experience, and in reality, it's A, B, and C, and you don't like A, B, and C as much as, you thought that you would. So that's equally as hard. I think I'm doubly blessed that yes, he has family here, so we have that sort of easy access to information, etc. But more than that, they're actually people I like. So
They're nice people.
yeah, that makes it a hell of a lot easier.
100%. So, what role has extended family played in your experience here?
Sometimes, it's as simple as knowing that there's a group chat for the family that if I've got a question and Kareem can't answer that because, it's been 30 years since he's lived here as well, just being able to put that out to a broad base of people that live here that can help put me in touch with different services or have ideas about how to tackle something is helpful on a surface level. And then things like, going to events where you're having a family catch up is wonderful because you've got this strong sense of identity that comes from family, regardless of where that family is connecting. I think also then having those closer connections with certain key members within a family where you can organize. Like we went a couple of weeks back and contacted a cousin and her daughter and grandchild, and we sort of, got to go to Walk of Cairo and we had a lovely lunch, and then we went to Tails, and for her child too, having like these bigger cousins come with him and show him how to be fearless when feeding the animals, like that multi-generational elements of family, I think is often overlooked but really critical.
So, we're going to talk a bit about accessibility and the blog. What inspired you to start Our Accessible Travels?
A big part of it was wanting to stay connected with family at home, a platform where I could talk about what it is that we were doing. And when I thought about how I would do that, we had conversations as a family and we talked about, well, what would make us stand out as a family? What's our identity as a family? And we have a number of chronic medical conditions. And we have Rai with both physical and neurodevelopmental disabilities. And so we thought it would be great to be able to share aspects of what that's like. We had been here in Cairo for a month traveling. And I think the thing is, when you don't have those types of issues to deal with, you can be a little bit unaware of what it means for someone else. I know I certainly have a very different lens now than I ever had before. And that lens now looks at things like pacing things. It looks like adapting. It looks like how do we make this situation work? How do we ensure that the needs of both children are met in ways that make sense? And how does the family as a whole cope with all of that? I wanted to be able to use it as a way to share what's real, share authentic stories about what that means. And I hope that in some ways it can encourage other people with, a variety of different challenges themselves to consider either taking a plunge or just a small trip, whatever it is, because I think travel nourishes the soul. And I think connecting with people from different cultures is a way to help you grow and develop different perspectives. So I really wanted to do something that would help me process even what it is that we're going through. And I want us to take advantage of this unique situation that we have. I make sure that the kids understand how unique their situation is and that they're very blessed and grateful to be able to have this opportunity. And so they should really make the most of it in whatever way makes sense for them. Also, from that accessibility lens, sometimes things seem really overwhelming and scary to the point where you're like, well, I could never do that, or that would be too hard. So I want to show the real bits of it. Like sometimes it is hard. But you know what? Also, it's hard at home. In your own country, it can also be hard. But there are so many benefits that can come from that. So I guess that's what I'm hoping to share and have people see that there's a different way to do things.
What kind of stories or tips resonate more with your readers?
I'm still at fairly early stages of it. So I found that, there have been times where I've been really consistent and times where it's been a bit harder to be consistent. I think any parent out there will relate to that. But things that tend to resonate with readers that we have on both the blog and people that follow along on socials, I guess elements that are universal to all of our experiences. So sometimes it's that real parenting moment within a story that people relate to. Sometimes it's
Yes.
an authentic share that I have myself about a reflection on travel and what that's meant for me and my personal development. And the accessibility tips definitely resonate with people when it comes to offering support for how can you make this happen? Not like here's the destination and here's why to go, but here's a destination and here's a way to make it work for your family.
How do you
Yeah.
manage everything alongside family life?
Again, I feel quite lucky in that my husband has created a number of websites for clients and for himself. I had previously blogged a little when the kids were sort of in preschool about child development and different activities to do to keep them engaged and interested. It had been a number of years and things have changed a bit, but I at least feel like I kind of had that previous experience to draw on. So it was somewhat easy to set up. What's been
Uh-huh.
more challenging about it is carving away time. And I think what I've come to the realization recently, while yes, it's a really flexible opportunity to do while you travel, right? It does still require dedicated moments. And so what I've done recently is to carve out some times when mama's working and what that means. And it meant, setting up different activities and different supports for Susu while I was working because she didn't have as much attention from me in those moments. And so that's just been like looking at the schedule and just very recently through getting frustrated with using the back end of WordPress and trying to upload some blogs that were just really annoying me. I spoke with my husband and I'm like, do you have a few hours per week? Because you're quicker at this. You can resize the images quicker than I can. I'm like, I need this support and this is what it would look like. Do you think that that's something that you could do? And, something that was taking me an hour ended up taking him half an hour. So, of course, it makes sense to sort of switch that up. And I'm lucky that I have that support here. In the future, I'd love to be able to have someone local who can support with things like that. I think that would be great. But at this point,
Same
it's
here.
been carving out the time for myself and prioritizing it and saying to the family, mummy supports you in all of these different things, and that will continue, but I need this. And for me to get this, it's going to mean some changes.
I feel like the key is asking for support. Because I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes as mums, we try to take everything else on. So it's really important to be okay with asking when you're struggling
Yeah,
with
and
something.
like we were talking about before, having somebody that comes in and helps with the house, that frees up an immense amount of mental. Like, yes, there's a physical element of actually doing the work, but she is incredible. And she came out the other day and showed me, because she doesn't speak English and I don't speak a lot of Arabic, but she showed me, the items of cleaning supplies that we were running low on. And like, how good is that? Just one less tab open in your brain means that you can then have the capacity to focus on other things that might derive more meaning from.
Because I feel like we're in a similar journey right now of finding or refinding ourselves and doing that free community. So it's
Yeah.
just nice to find someone on the same wavelength that, and you said, yeah, accountability partners and just
Yes.
making sure that we're both carving out that time to just do things for
Yeah.
ourselves. And
Because it's easy to drop yourself down. And I think what's helped me in some ways is I had some fairly serious health issues a few years back. And a lot of elements were stress that were leading into those, right? And so it was like a wake up moment of it's okay for me to put myself a little bit higher up the totem pole of our family. It's okay not always to be at or near the top, but for me to give myself permission and say, in this case, it's okay for my priority to be at the top and the kids to be a little bit below it for a little short time. And, sometimes
with
I have
no
to remind
guilt,
myself of that, right? Like, because it's hard as a mum.
100%. If you could dream big, what's the next step for our accessible travels? If you could dream big, 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 big.
Big, big, big. Well, I am dreaming big. I don't know about big, 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 but I'm dreaming big. And I see it as forming part of like a travel ecosystem in a way. Like I always want our accessible travels to be authentically my voice and our experience as a family. But beyond that, I think I'd like to help support other families to travel more accessibly, intentionally, with connection in mind. And so I'd love to offer a service for people where I can, particularly if they have, neurodivergent children or family members, to sit down with them and troubleshoot what travel might be like for them and how could they make trips or longer term travel work for their family? How could they gain the most out of that type of experience? And beyond that, I've just registered Egypt with Kids as a website because I think Egypt is often overlooked as far as a place for families. Like it seems too hard. So I'd love to create a space where it's for, yes, tourists coming in, but also for expats and locals to see the amazing things that Egypt has to offer and create a space where, similar to what you're doing, but with a different focus, where families can connect, but in my way through the adventure of travel and exploring somewhere that's, very different than what they're used to.
So we're going to move towards favorite places in Cairo and in Egypt. It's my favorite part. So do you have a favorite spot here in Cairo that feels special to you?
I think it differs depending on the day and who's with me. So anything that is like for my daughter and to help her feel connected with Egypt is always going to be an animal experience. So here nearby to where we live is Maryland, which has Jungle Joy. It's this like small little animal engagement experience. They also love Tails over at Walk of Cairo. One of our favorites is Africa Safari Park, which is on the road between Alex and Cairo. It's about an hour outside of Alex on the way to Cairo. And you drive through, and like at one point, they put food on your car, and baboons are on your car, like scrambling and climbing all over the car. You're feeding a camel through the window. They put food on your head, and all the deer come and eat the food off your head. You get to feed a hippo. Like it's something that the kids really enjoy, having those connections and seeing animals and being around them. It helps them to feel grounded. My son and I love kayaking, so going for a kayak, going for a paddle on the Nile is a really cool experience. I think, just even taking a felucca on the Nile, I think more than actually what the place is, it's that moment of discovery, that moment of finding a hidden gem. I have so many wow and pinch me moments of just like, how is this my life? From such a small country town vibe to now living in such a massive city and centuries old with architecture that was started before I'm used to seeing anything in Australia. Like Australia has the most beautiful, beautiful scenery. We're very lucky that way. And we have the oldest living continuous civilization. But what we don't have necessarily is that sort of architectural history. So walking around here in Heliopolis, where I live, which was established by Baron Empin, a Belgian architect, and just like I literally can look out that window right now and see, what things could have been like back then. Having family members that can talk about, what Cairo used to be like, looking back at old family photos and seeing things, I think is pretty cool.
Outside of the city, is there a beach destination or
So
any other destination that you love?
we've only been really to Ain Sopna on the Red Sea so far for the beach. Obviously, we've been up to Alex as well for the Mediterranean, but I love Fayoum. I forgot to share that. I love Fayoum. I think there's a lot of peace to be found and there's beauty in the desert. But to me, the awe of standing there and looking at these massive lakes that are in the middle of the desert, like it just doesn't seem real. So we went over to Lake Karun to see the flamingo migration. And while we couldn't get quite as close as I would have hoped to, I'm hoping that next year I can somehow plan to see that a little bit better, maybe. Being there and seeing these flamingos take flight from the lake and across the like mountains of the desert. It was really surreal. Yeah. So Fayoum and doing the pottery, the kids really loved that, having that hands-on experience. I did a little bit too. But it's just such a quiet, peaceful place going out into the desert, doing the sand dunes. I think that's really special.
If you could leave families with one key message about accessible travel and parenting abroad, what would that be?
One of the key messages that I share is presence over perfection. And that can relate both to parenting abroad and to travel. And I think with that, it's about letting go of the ideas sometimes that we have that everything has to be perfect, that we have to tick off all of the items on the bucket list. It's about taking that moment to recognize that you have this unique opportunity when you're traveling to connect with your kids, to connect with yourself, and to connect with the culture around you.
Thank you. A real pleasure speaking to you. I want to
Thank
thank
you.
you for sharing your story, giving us such an honest and inspiring look at your family life in Cairo and the work you do through our accessible travel. I feel like we need to probably schedule another call to talk a bit more about our accessible travel. But I love the fact that it's a reminder that travel and adventure can be for everyone, and the creativity and resilience that families can find wherever they are and they can thrive in any environment. And to everyone listening, I hope this conversation inspires you to embrace new experiences, support accessibility, and celebrate the joy of family life in all forms. So, this was another episode of Women in Cairo, and I'm so grateful that you joined us and stay tuned for more stories.
I've really enjoyed the experience, and I think it's so important what you're doing to create a platform so that a variety of different families can see what it's like to thrive here in Cairo.
Yeah, it's been a huge pleasure, and just really want to thank you for having all the enthusiasm and passion that you brought to the session and all the gems that you dropped. Ding, ding, ding. Thank you, Keticia.
Great to chat, Ilse.
All
Thanks.
right.